Welcome to Everyday Supernatural with Matt Young. Have you ever wondered if there is more to life than the things you can see in the natural world? Have you encountered angels? Had a vision? Do you hear voices? Have you been healed miraculously or experienced the power of God? There are many examples in the Bible of spiritual events that are beyond our physical ability. And these exciting stories still happen today to people all around the world. I invite you to listen in and take part in the conversation while we learn to live your life like every day is supernatural.
Welcome to Everyday Supernatural. My name is Matt Young. You can check us out at everydaysupernatural.org. Today, I have a special guest. His name is Curtis Scoon. You can find him at curtisschoontv.com. We are going to go through a bunch of different things about his life, what he's doing now, kind of his inner guidance system of how he's been a successful entrepreneur, producer, filmmaker, the whole kind of gamut of stuff. So without further ado, let me bring Curtis onto the broadcast. So Curtis, thank you so much for coming on today. It's great to have you.
Oh man, thank you for having me, Matt. You're very patient and gracious, I must say.
It's an honor and a pleasure. You have an amazing story, and there's like probably 5 hours to like 3 weeks of just, I mean, there's so many different things that I've followed you a bit. I found you on Twitter because of Jason Whitlock, mm-hmm. And I tell people you are the most interesting Twitter follow out there because you keep it real, you speak the truth, and there's just no apologies, and I appreciate that about you. So
thank you.
One of the things that I wanted to get into today is you have been very successful in many different areas. I would call you a pioneer. I would call you a trailblazer, or some people use the word apostolic when it comes to biblical terms of like when you think of men and women of the Bible who've paved the way for others. That's kind of how I see you. Is
wow.
You seem to be the person, you have that leadership gift, that leadership quality, but it's like you can do it on your own, but you choose to bring other people along with you. And so if you would, I just want to just jump right into the deep end of the pool and just go
ahead.
Hey man, you have, from an early age all the way to now, you have seemed to, you've had tremendous adversity, things that have kind of gone on in your life, but it's like you just kind of and you just keep being, success after success after success. What has kind of guided you through this process? I know you're very, I hate to say you're smart because it sounds cliche, but you wouldn't have got to where you were without wisdom, because there's a difference between being intellectual versus having wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And so can you describe a bit of that process for you throughout the years?
First of all, I want to say that who I am today is very different from who I was as a young man. I learned about things the unconventional way. I learned about wrongdoing by doing wrong. And I've had a transformation of sorts throughout my life. I think they say God look out for fools and babies, and I wasn't wearing any diapers. So I was under the grace at that time. This is what I believe, because I've been in some very, very precarious situations. Nothing that I'm proud of, but I'll just go ahead and get into it. I've had several run-ins with the law. I've been accused of all sorts of crimes. All crimes of aggression, by the way, nothing involving women or children. But and I have no convictions, but I still had to go through the process several times. As a matter of fact, there's a case law in New York with my name on it, Curtis Scoon versus the people of the state of New York, because I was convicted at trial, but I overturned the conviction in the appellate court. I've been a suspect in murder and so on and so forth. I don't mean to shock your audience, but I don't think people could truly appreciate what I'm doing today if they don't know the whole journey.
Absolutely.
So and there's, for me, when I think back, I can only think that maybe there was a greater plan for me down the road, because I don't think by my own choices that I escaped the many pitfalls that I did. So, yes, in all honesty, with little modesty, yes, I am very intelligent, but intelligence alone couldn't have gotten me through what I've survived, you know? And the wisdom, I've always been a student of life, right? They say smart people learn from their own mistakes, but wise people learn from the mistakes of others. So I pay attention to what other people are doing, and I make notes. Also, one of the things that played a key role in my life, in my business today, and even when I was on the wrong side, I've always had really good discipline. Discipline is so important, because discipline means you'll be prepared for certain things, because through practice and dedication, and it's almost instinctive for you, through your discipline, and you take care of yourself and your mind. And I'm a perfectionist at that. So yeah, that's some of the things that I went through. It took me going through all those phases to become the man that I am today. And I'm very pleased with the man that I am today. And it doesn't have as much to do with personal successes. You mentioned that I've had all these successes and so on and so on. I've also had a lot of failures. People don't typically talk about their failures. You only hear about the sunny part of life. I've had a lot of failures. I failed on a lot of levels, personal levels, and what have you. But at the end of the day, I think it all contributed to the person that sits before you now. And I'm doing some really good things that I'm proud of, things that hopefully will impact others, and make it where they don't have to learn the way I learned, but they can learn what I learned without all the trials and tribulations.
Right. So let's just go to it. I mean, obviously, one of the things that you're well known for, I think most people my age, I think it was like 1984, Run DMC,
Mm-hmm.
All the kids in my school, that was kind of the thing, NWA, Eazy-E, that was my generation. And, one of your trials and tribulation was, an accusation that was against you. And I think, like, people go through stuff in life, and you've obviously gone through a lot of different things,
Mm-hmm.
but most people don't make it out emotionally stable, spiritually stable. Like, those kind of things ruin somebody's life forever. And it's like you have these experiences where it's as if you've kind of just, they come, and from the outside it looks like, oh yeah, perseverance, overcomer, but it's almost like it's just another step to kind of launch you into greatness, if I could even say that over somebody's tragedy. But it was a tragedy for you to have to go through some of these processes. But what is it like to go through these kind of accusations, and to persevere to become the man that you are now?
Adversity introduces a man to himself, right? The more you're challenged, the more pressure that you're under, the more in tune with yourself you get. A lot of people go through life lying to themselves and everyone else. But that adversity, it'll show you who you are. And I've always held true that a blessing and a curse are one and the same, the difference being in the application. So my natural reaction when this thing happened was first, I, how do I defend myself? And when you're wrongfully accused of a crime, you have no idea where it's coming from. So you don't know where to address it, what your move should be. But as things revealed itself, it turned out that uh, the police never even questioned me. But what they did that I don't like, it's okay that you got wrong information, but after they didn't question me, they never took me off the hook. In fact, I'm the subject in several documentaries on Netflix and a couple other places with this incident. And it wasn't until last year, 18 years later, that they arrested two other people. So I've had to have this cloud over my head
Right.
for 18 years, man. Like people would Google and see my name. Now, some people would say, well, they never arrested him. He didn't go to prison. But for me, my reputation is my credit score in life. And they did irreparable damage to my reputation, especially at a time when I was most vulnerable, trying to turn my life around. And the things that I've done with that cloud over my head, it could only be the work of God, man, because I became a published writer in Playboy. I became a book contributor for a book that receives a starred review in Publishers Weekly. I own 25% across the board of all the rights of that book. It's called Queen's Reign Supreme by Ethan Brown. I became a producer on television. Keep in mind, I never went to school for journalism, for television production, anything. I went to college 1 year, and that was only to avoid going to prison while I was out on appeal for the case that I mentioned earlier, where I created case law.
Right.
So I produced on television. I got the experience that I needed to produce my own film, Black, White, and Blue, a film about politics, race, and police. And from there, it got me involved in politics. I became the #1 backer of Coleman Young II when he ran for mayor of Detroit in 2017. And then I backed him when he ran for Congress in 2018. From there, we set up a STEM program in Detroit that I am the executive director of to teach kids STEM in Detroit public school system. We have a partnership with DPS, and I am the executive director. I have a mental health business in DC that I employ somewhere in the vicinity of 45 to 60 people, W-2 and contractors. And I independently made my own film, Black, White, and Blue, which, like I said, led me to dealing with Coleman. And I met him during the film. And that's when I got into politics. And now I'm doing ScoonTV.com, which is media where I pay journalists who wrote for Forbes and Wall Street Journal and Daily Caller and Playboy and other publications. I pay them to write exclusive content for my site. And I don't bother them about what it should be. My site is unbiased as news media should be, but you can't find that anymore. So when you think about what we started talking about, being accused of murder and all these other crimes and this, that, the other, to doing the things that I'm doing today, I think that my life is a testimony that you just can't throw away hope on anyone. You never know what kind of redeemable value there is in people. And I may be special, I don't know, but I want to use what I know to help as many people as I can.
Absolutely. So let's go like there. So you just mentioned a bunch of things that like, so I've seen Black, White, and Blue. It's on Amazon. It's, I think one of my favorite lines was BLM is the Trojan horse of the Black community.
It is.
And I love because you get the Trumpers, you get the crazy from each side, and you just let it speak for itself. What
Yes.
motivated you? And by the way, you need to make some more films. What motivated you to put this out?
2012. I wasn't really political prior to Obama's second term. As a black man, I was glad when Obama got elected in 2008. But by 2012, I was over that, and I was looking at what was going on. The racial polarization going on in the country, beginning with Trayvon Martin's death, killing. I didn't like the people who were representing it and how they were politicizing all of these incidents. Turns out that Black Lives Matter is really a white LGBT advocacy group using black LGBT, which is why Dr. Randy Short referred to them as a Trojan horse. There's a political sleight of hand going on there where they use the trauma and tragedy of black heterosexual men as political currency to advocate for and advance an agenda that has nothing to do with black people. And if you go on their website, I think they may have changed it. They talk about destroying the nuclear family. They may not have used the word destroy, but they want to get rid of the nuclear family. And you cannot be for black people if you are against the nuclear family. And the reason why I say that is because throughout history, when you see successful communities of any persuasion, there's always an intact family structure. There's never been an example of a successful society, empire, or what have you, that deals in alternative lifestyles as the norm. So what Black Lives Matter is doing, they're using the black community as a petri dish. It's an experiment. Like, I don't know if what they're promoting is even workable. And I'm not trying to find out. I'm nobody's lab rat. Let's just go back to what works. And what works is the patriarchy. The man, the woman, the children, the family unit. A strong man is the foundation of a strong family. And a strong family is the foundation of a strong community. Black people are no exception to that. That works for everyone. It doesn't matter their ethnicity or their religious background. When you see successful immigrants, one of the things they have in common, be they Jewish, Catholic, Hispanic, East Asian, whatever, is that they have a strong family unit. Now, I'm not going to say that means that everybody in the unit is going to be happy or all units are created equal. You know what I mean? But it is the basis of success on a larger scale throughout history. So why do we attack it? Do these people really mean black people any good? And of course, there are anomalies. There are people who just don't fit the norm. And I'm not saying that we should ostracize those people. I'm just saying that we shouldn't normalize that. We can accept them and respect their rights and so on and so forth, but to promote the abnormal as the normal, that's not really a good thing.
So I remember, I graduated high school in 92, so a long time ago. And I remember back then whispers of there's the gay playbook. And I remember people joking like, let's see this playbook. But what I've seen unfold is exactly what we're seeing now. There's some people pulling the strings. There's some people financing these kind of things. But, where do you actually see this going? And how do you see it actually taking a turn for even worse? Or do you think there's still hope that, because it seems like pastors, prophets, even comedians, it seems like people are just neutered and they're not speaking the truth anymore about these things. And it's as if there's been like this like spell put over people to where they're just like
Mm.
going along with, you know, the propaganda they hear, you know, week in and week out. Like, what do you, I mean, because to me, there's the emotional element. I mean, you keep bombarding people with information and it goes in their subconscious mind and their conscious mind, and they get programmed if they're watching some of these news outlets and listening to certain, I mean, let's just be honest, there's some crazy liberal people promoting some stuff that has nothing to do with God or the Bible. And it's almost like somebody's put some money in their pocket and they're like, let's read this other gospel that has nothing to do with God or Jesus.
Yeah.
And what's weird is, why don't you see this in the Muslim communities? Why don't you see this in the Jewish communities? It happens to be, I don't know if you know much about this, but it just happens to be in the Christian communities a lot, where you're seeing people are drinking this stuff left and right. Like it's, you know what I'm saying?
There's an indoctrination going on. I'm going to say this, right? I think, first of all, I want to make it clear. I try not to judge people. If they're doing anything that's wrong, they're going to have to answer for it. And, excuse me, not answer to me. Now, having said that, I think the same-sex lifestyle is a non-reproductive lifestyle. As a matter of fact, I know it is.
Right.
Two men can't have a kid, two women can't have a kid, right? So, hypothetically, if we were to isolate all the same-sex people and put them on an island or a continent, what would happen in the next 100 years if they don't procreate? So how do they keep it going? Well, it involves conversion, normalization. I think that the removal of God opens the door for people to be open to those type of things, because historically the Bible has been anti-homosexual. If I'm not mistaken, there were two places called Sodom and Gomorrah, Sodom being the root word of sodomy,
Yep.
that was destroyed for that behavior. Now, that's not me talking, that's the scriptures, right? And if you adhere to the scriptures, it means that those practices in those places are forbidden. So how preachers who hold up the Bible promote those things, I don't know. Now, if you say you're secular and you don't believe in God and you do what you want to do, that's a different story. Well, hey, we'll see how that works out for you, but you cannot change the word. I remember when Beto O'Rourke was running, one of the things he said that I thought was fascinating in his town hall with Don Lemon was, if he got nominated or elected, he would make it mandatory for places of worship to perform same-sex marriages, or they would lose their tax deductible, their nonprofit status,
Right.
And I was like, if this is the basis of their belief, why would government intervene and change it? And this is not making a judgment on their lifestyle, right? I'm not making a judgment on anyone's lifestyle, but your lifestyle is your lifestyle. Like I'm talking to you, Matt. I don't really wonder what your preference is, and I'm not interested in it. Why do some people feel like I need to know what they do behind closed doors? I don't. I really don't. And I don't hire people who are alternative lifestyle and all that. I don't mistreat people. I don't discriminate against people for any reason. Do I agree with them? Well, no, not all the time. You know what I mean? But I'm not on a witch hunt, so to speak.
Right.
So I don't understand the need to just push this thing in front of people's face all the time. I would really not. I would really rather not know what anyone's doing in their bedroom, regardless of their sexual orientation, unless they're doing it with me. You know what I mean? And that's their business. It's not my business.
Right. So why do you think there's been such a push in this area? Like, what's your contention?
It could be a lot of things. It could be soft eugenics. It could be something spiritual. I don't know. You know, if it's a non-life producing act, could this be getting encouraged as a means of population reduction, depopulation? I mean, abortion is being promoted in New York City. I think it was last year or 2 years ago. The abortion rate for black babies was higher than the birth rate.
Right.
I think it has been documented that Margaret Sanger wanted to control the population of black people. There are people who are considered undesirables, right? And anyone who is being pushed into partaking in non-life producing behavior should question the people encouraging them. Are they really interested in your rights, or is something else going on? You know, and I don't have the answers to those questions. But I think there's a lot of people who think there's too many people on the planet, and they are incorporating a lot of different ways to reduce their population, be it through lifestyle, toxic food, wars, pandemics, and what have you. There's a lot of things going on. It's not like a one tactic strategy. I think it's happening on multiple levels. And why would anyone want to control population? Well, I think the earth can sustain the people, but what happens is the system itself may fall apart. There's too many people, and there's too many people who want to break away, change things, so on and so forth. I think it's a matter of control. And I'm dealing more with theory than actual fact right now, because I ponder these things. And
Right.
I'm like, what is the reason to reduce population? And I don't believe it's to save the environment or anything. I think it is really to maintain control of the many by the few. Keep the number to a controllable number. And we may be reaching that place where the few can no longer control the many with the same efficiency as they once did. That's my thought.
Yeah, and I think there is as a pastor, I think there is a spiritual component, but I don't think to give credit to dark forces, demons, and all those kind of things, because I think many people don't need that kind of influence. It's money, it's power, the things that people have been fighting for, throughout all of human history. Because to me, and this may be the first time you've ever even like heard these kind of concepts, or actually maybe not knowing you, but I believe it's the job as the sons and daughters of God to actually transform the earth, not what these people are doing through abortion, through GMO, through like all the just crazy stuff that even if you say the wrong word, you get censored on different platforms. The magic medicine, all that kind of stuff that people are like into. It's just, I just can't believe that people are so blind. But going back to the Bible, like you just see some of these things. It's just a repetition of what's happened through so many societies over the years. That same thing, different day, just different people pulling the strings. And it's almost, and this is why I think you are such an important voice, whether you would even label yourself in the ways that I would say, like, it's like it's like the prophetic, like, battering ram that really, I think this is what you started to do. But I think even in the next 5 years, you'll see, though you will actually have opened up the way for other people to come and do similar things that you're doing, because you've been the one to take, as they say, the arrows or the bullets. And somebody's got to be, the man or the woman to do those kind of things. And so I think it's important to honor that you're doing it, because I think you know it, but at the same time, 5 years from now, you're really, really going to look back and go, this really was God's plan. So part of me just wants to encourage you, and to keep doing what you're doing. But there's just so much more. I think that, not to put more weight or more burden on you, that I think you can do and will do in the future. But so one of the questions I have for you, you've done many different things. What inspires you to write, to do movies, what did you say it was? You have like some kind of like counseling or mental health facility. You've kind of, it's like the ultimate entrepreneur. You're doing like many different things that most people would not. They would do good at one thing, but not 5 different things. You know what I mean? Most people are successful in business in one area, but not in multiple areas. So what is it that has helped you? Like, do you see a vision when you start these businesses, and then you're like, okay, step 1 through 25, or is it a step out in faith of like, hey, I've heard you say, you had a paper route before you were even old enough to have a paper route.
I was.
And you just stepped out and did it. How is the process for you when you start these businesses? Because I think this is the meat that I think most people who've never started a business, who have no idea, maybe they're 19, 20, and they're like, hey, I know God's got a plan for my life, but they don't really know, like, how do you help people to they're not going to be you, and they can't be you, and they need to be themselves. But what are things for your process where you started some of these business, made films, all this kind of stuff? What's that journey like for you?
Matt, I'm so humbled right now. If I'm being 100% honest, I've never really taken into consideration the challenges in almost a naive, childlike way. I embark on these things, and in the process, the doors just open. They just do, and I I cannot sit here and take credit for all of that. I have a faith that things are going to work out for me because they usually do. But I never really do the research and engage the challenges that's in front of me. And that has helped me. When I wrote my first screenplay, I did not know that there's 200,000 scripts registered each year. Because if I did, I probably wouldn't have written. So sometimes you can have too much information. You know what I mean? Like, look, when I started making Black, White, and Blue, I did not understand that documentaries don't make money.
Right.
And the primary purpose of a documentary is to shape a narrative. I did not know these things. Sometimes my ignorance has contributed more to my success than my knowledge. Even with the Scoon TV, I did have a better grasp of that than the previous ventures, but getting the writers, I didn't know the going rates for writers. Like, I want to say, I don't want to say I'm whimsical, but if I get an idea, I lock onto it. I say, this is what I want to do. And I just have faith and I trust in the process. And before you know it, the people that I need come to me and the door open up. But it's not magical
Right.
because I put a lot of work and time into this, into everything that I do. I think about it all the time. I can't stop. I don't know how to turn the switch off. I'm not getting burnt out or anything. It's just like I'm a workhorse like that, you know? I think I'm driven. I really am. And if not for the successes that I've had that can serve as my foundation, I may have I may have driven myself crazy by now. You understand what I'm saying? Like, because nobody can fail repeatedly and not have some kind of success as a life raft to be like, you know what? I was right about this. I'm not wrong all the time. I'm thinking when it comes to business, purely from an entrepreneurial standpoint, there's a lot of fear. I've read some statistics that by year two, 30% of all businesses fail. By year five, 50% fail. And by year 10, 70% fail. So being an entrepreneur is not easy for
Right.
anyone. You know, like the odds are against you. So if you're somebody who's fearful of failing, you know, that might not be the path for you. You know, and it's okay. But yes, Pat, to answer your question, my methodology is simple. For whatever reason, I'll lock into something and I'll decide to do it. And by the grace of God, it gets done. I had no idea about starting a media site until Trump got kicked off Twitter, which was in January. And lo and behold, April 20th, I had my soft launch of a news site in 90 days, man. From conception to execution in 90 days for something like this. I don't think that's the norm at all.
No, absolutely not.
You know, look, I don't think I didn't even have the idea until Trump got kicked off. And I was like, man, I'm going to start my own site. Because if they could do this to him, they could do it to me. And I want to be able to get my voice out there. And I didn't just want a website, I wanted my own server. And my baby brother, Jaron, he built it out for me because that's his thing. He's really good at that. I got the guy in my family. You know what I mean? Like that saved me a lot of money. Like I tell you, the pieces are, and I didn't even consider that. He told me when I was doing it, if you need me to take care of the server, I will. When I decided to do it, I hadn't even considered his involvement. So I just feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And as long as I keep doing what I'm supposed to be doing, the doors will keep opening for me. When I run into that resistance where it's not working out, I'm just going to have to interpret that as maybe this isn't meant for me. Not that it's a bad idea, but it's not for me.
Right. So describe one of those times. I mean, have you, like, because all I hear is like, it just does seem to be like, and I know it's a lot of hard work and it's not like you just make a decision and it all, you know, all happens. But what are some of the failures have you come up against in the last like 5 to 10 years? Have you had any where you're like, hey, I learned my lesson here and now, you know, I'm going to, or are some of those things just so far back that you don't really think about them anymore? Because you seem like the kind of guy when something negative happens, you're just like, yep. And you just go.
It's funny you said that, Matt. I don't really pay attention to my wins or my losses too much. I don't. The book I mentioned, I don't even have a copy of it. The Playboy article that told my story, 13 pages, where I wrote a 1-page sidebar, framed and defamed, I don't even have a copy of it. The episodes on TV that I produced, I have no copies of any of them. I'm proud of them, but to me, it's in the books. It's what's next. I'm looking forward all the time, not looking back. You know, one of the things that I failed at, I had wanted to get into selling human hair. I had a contact that was in China, and I had gotten this young lady who used to be on this show called 106 in Park. Her name is Free, and I was trying to get her to be the face of it. I bought the website name freeflowinghair.com. You know, the hair extension piece is human hair.
Yep.
Great idea, had Free, but it didn't work out because it wasn't for me. It never got off the ground. We ran into internal issues and it just became problematic. And that's the other thing. I do a lot of things. I start them by myself. But I don't believe anyone does anything by themselves. Not anything of substance or of real meaning and purpose. You know, a one-man gang, how long will that last, you know?
Right.
So you got to put together a good team. I believe in a collective effort. And it's really hard, not just as a black person, but as a human being, to get cooperation beyond a certain number of people. The smaller the number, the more cooperative it is. But as it grows, man, it's all these different egos and all of this. And this is a human thing. You'll find this everywhere. So part of being a good leader is being able to manage egos and understand people and knowing how to deal with them. I'm a very good personnel manager and assessment of talent. Yeah, so that helps me a lot.
So are you able to redirect those people that think they can be you? Because I imagine you've had those people like, oh, I can do what he's doing. And they have you had
all the time.
Yeah.
All the
and
time.
So how do you deal with those people and help redirect them to where they're really supposed to be going? Because I think you are a target for that when you're successful, when you have a leadership gift, and it's a spiritual gift. I mean, that's the thing is there's people that have talents and abilities or learn things, but it's like a magnet. People are going to be attracted to you and then they're going to, oh, I can do what he's doing and be better at it. And it's like, nah, you can't. But how do you help them to be the best person they can be?
First, let me tell you a story, right? I wanted to set up a mental health business in New York. So I know a guy who's in the mental health field in New York, and I'm not a clinician, by the way, purely entrepreneurial, right?
Right.
But he's in the field. And I asked him, I said, how much you making, man? And we're good friends. So he said, I'm making 70. I said, okay, I'll pay you 140 to run my business in New York. I offered to double his salary, right? So we could get it going. All right. So listen, he decided that he wanted to look into starting his own business. He didn't have that idea until I talked to him about it. As he was doing the research, supposedly for me, but it turned out to be for himself. He said, he said one of his friends asked him, why don't I show him how to do it? In other words, it went from him working for me to me showing him how to do what I do, right? You wasn't thinking about this before. And you know what my response to him was? I said, can Michael Jordan teach you how to dunk from the foul line?
Right.
He cannot. You are not Michael Jordan, right? And a lot of people, they don't get it. They think that's arrogant. But if it took me coming to you to make you think about doing what I do, then is it really what you're supposed to be doing? Because nobody had to come to me for me to think of the ideas that I have.
Right.
They come from me. You understand? They come through me. Now, as far as the people you were talking about that think they can do what I do and that work for me, do I try to redirect them? Yes, I do. But I know a problem employee, a problem person when I see them. I try to work with them. I try to coach them. I try different approaches with them. But the whole time, I am prepared to replace them.
Right.
Yeah. You understand what I'm saying? I may not replace it. If they can get it, if they come around, I'll keep them. But if the minute you start showing me signs that, there's some kind of insubordination there's some kind of, I'm not going to be your therapist or any of those things. I'm going to be like, this person is going to be a problem. and I can't put too much responsibility on them. I've recently just had someone leave me with no advance notification or anything. And it was a person who was bent on having me rely on their processes and their everything too much, which is a red flag for me as someone
Right.
experienced in business. You know what I mean? You want to distribute that responsibility. You can't have one person stopping your show that if they leave, now everybody's running around like chickens without heads. And this person, a professional person, for no reason other than they didn't get to dictate things the way they wanted to, left on the day of. But guess what? I knew it was coming a week or so before, and already had their replacement in place. And that's your job as a boss and a business owner. You have to have an instinct, be intuitive to these type of things, knowing when there's some people, man, they just they're not happy with themselves, so they're not going to be happy for you. And there's really not much you can do about that. And this
Right.
is irrespective of race, ethnicity. We have way more things in common as human beings than people want to acknowledge.
Right.
People are people, man. And there's a lot of things. Sometimes, even when you're too successful, you got to limit your time around people who aren't that successful, not because you're an elitist, it's because you will serve as a reminder to them of things maybe they want to be and might never be. And
Right.
unknowingly, you cause them some kind of distress unintentionally. It's amazing, man. It really is. And everybody say they want to be successful, but there's a lot more that comes with that than a big bank account.
Right. Yeah. Well, and not everybody who wants to be successful wants to put in the work, or
No, absolutely not. Are you
they want
kidding
to
me?
leap off of someone else's platform. Because even in that case, you could have given that person more power, more money, but they still would have been a problem.
Because they
And
want to be you. They really want to be you.
yeah, the problem would have just gotten bigger.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
that's the thing. When you're a leader, it's like, yeah, it's time. But I want to narrow it like in on two things in what you just said. You said intuition, and I wanted to kind of give like an analogy in the church, because
Please.
what happens is it's kind of like all of your experience in the church, people will be like, oh, you're the prophet, you're the apostle, come lay hands on me and impart into me everything you have. And it's this mentality that I can pray and impart into you all the trouble, all the trials, all the, they just want the success. They want the healing
The
anointing,
shortcut.
right? And they think you're just going to like walk into the room and impart into, it's like, oh, you want the good? Well, you're going to get all the bad too. Like you can start right now and all the tragedy I've experienced and the troubles I've experienced. And you can go through those first to receive real impartation. And I think that's the part where everyone wants to, the analogy of, I've seen how the sausage is made in the sausage factory. Most people don't want to work in the factory. They just want to own the business kind of thing. But that's like what you're describing is in a lot of the circles I run. And it's like, oh, pray for me for impartation. But people don't want, they don't want the negative stuff. They don't want to have to go through the troubles and the trials to get to where they're going. But the thing I wanted to kind of hit on with you is you talked about intuition. And this is the kind of stuff like I teach on what I would call like a knowing or intuition, because it's like your inner guidance system. And
Very much.
you have a very, very strong one. And so so you just described it, but like unpack it a little more. And I don't know if you've ever like really, because you are on to the next thing. You're not sitting there and celebrating yourself and going, wow, look what I just did. I'm so amazing. You're on to the next thing, which is common for people who have what I would call a strong knowing or intuition. But what was the process when you're like, is it just lots of experience over the years where you're like, this person's going to be trouble, so I better find their replacement? Is it like something you see, like, because some people don't think about these things like visions, like internally, externally. What's that process for you? Am I making sense to you? Because I'm trying to combine the spiritual along with the emotional and all these kind of things. Because sometimes people have these spiritual gifts where they have strong intuition and they don't realize that these things are from God. They just think, oh, I'm just really smart and I've just kind of, because most people, they'll see these things, but they don't trust their gut. You know what I mean?
Trust mine.
Yeah. And so what's that process like for you?
Okay, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to share something with you. Let's go back to May of 2002. I had a dream. I dreamt I was in the audience of a talk show, and the guest was a gypsy psychic. When she came out, she looked at me and she called my name. And in my sleep, I told her, I said, if you want to impress me, tell me how to get rich. Because I was struggling at the time, right? And I needed some money because I was trying to reinvent myself. And she said to me, you will have to come out of the fire if you want the light to shine on you. As the very second she finished that sentence, my eyes opened. And I sat up on my bed. And I was like, well, this is a peculiar dream, man. I never had anything like this. Okay. Fast forward to October 30th. Jam Master Jay is killed that year. The day later, a day after, they start saying, by the next night, people were saying they're trying to say it was you. I immediately understood the dream, and that was the fire. I leaned on that dream to give me the strength to get through that period in my life. With the understanding that if I could come through the fire, the light would shine on me. This is how I interpreted it. This is how I used it. I was told that fire is necessary for purification. So you must come through the fire to stand in the light. For a long time, I took that dream to be specific to me. But I think all people have their own fire that they have to go through before they can stand in the light. I think whether it be a child having cancer, you lose a spouse, whatever, it's not always you're going to get wrongfully accused of murder. But
Right.
we all have our fire that's necessary to purify us. This is my belief, right? And I think I've always been in tune with myself. But the more adversity that I faced, the more I learned to lean on that intuition and trust it. And it has never failed me, Matt, ever. Not in anything I do. And I didn't know you was a pastor. And I'm not a sanctified, holier than thou person. You know, my language is sometimes a little racy, but I'm working on certain things. But I'll tell you this though. I pray every day. And I pray for three things: for guidance, protection, and forgiveness. And perhaps that intuition that we're talking about is the answer to my prayers. It helps guide me in all my undertakings. Yeah. And I just also, I believe that in life, the more we know, the more we are responsible for. So I cannot afford to be the guy that I was at 20
Right.
because I didn't know as much as I know now. So if I do the things that I did at 20 now, I may not get that grace that I got back then. In fact, I know I won't. You understand? Look, so look, you know, the more you know, the more you're responsible for. So yes, I'm learning and I'm just trying to be as righteous as I can, as I know how to be. Each and every day, I make a conscious effort to do just that. And I think a result of that is that inner guidance, that voice that I get. I mean, I'm not ashamed to say that I'm intelligent, but I also will say that intelligence alone is not responsible for the outcomes that I have. There's a lot of intelligent people who don't get anything done. So you know what I mean? Of substance, yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's always more than that, because there's so much that's beyond our control. So much. Again, I'll tell you another story with my mental health. I was selling DVDs in a parking lot. Had my eye on Hollywood. I was producing for BET at the time, which was just contract work, but I was selling DVDs every day to make money, bootleg DVDs. So far removed from what I was trying to do. And it just so happened that one day in the parking lot, I met a man who I ran into a man. I didn't meet him. I'd known him, hadn't seen him for 15 years. He had become a social worker and ordained minister. And he introduced me to the mental health business. He saw me in that parking lot. He had moved to that part of Georgia from the DC area and ran into me. I knew nothing about the mental health business until he introduced me to it. And selling DVDs put me in the place I needed to be in to cross paths with him. And that's how I look at life. You never know where your blessing is going to come from. It may come from the most unrelated thing, but you have to have faith. Because the whole time I was selling DVDs, I felt like something was holding me back. I thought I was supposed to go to Hollywood and get things done. I spent the summer of 2009 in Hollywood, in LA. And getting back on the plane going to Atlanta was the saddest day that I had experienced because I'm so optimistic when things didn't work out. I was like, I wonder what happened. You understand? Like, in my own naive way, I expect things to work out. And what happened was it was working out. It wasn't working out the way I thought it should work out. It worked out with me with the mental health business, which is the most lucrative business I've ever been involved in. And it puts me in a position to do all the other things that I'm doing. So yes, that was part of my journey. Being in that parking lot, selling DVDs, bootleg DVDs, by the way, and crossing paths with that individual who I hadn't seen in 15 years. You just got to remain faithful and steadfast, man. Every day, I see reason to increase my faith. Every day, by the outcomes I receive.
So what was your journey? I mean, I've heard you tell a bit about like growing up and those kind of things, but did you get any guidance as far as religion, spirituality, or was this just day by day? I mean, because I believe you've probably had this intuition since you were born, and it just grows as you kind of honor what God's doing in your life, no matter what. I mean, this is the thing is most people don't realize. It doesn't matter whether you're committing a crime or whether you live a holy, perfect life. Like, these things still work because it's a gift, and no matter what you're doing. And sometimes, oh, it only works here. No, it works everywhere. Because when you hear that voice say, run, you better run, or when that voice says, you know what I'm saying? But what was growing up like? Did you get any spiritual guidance? Where did all this stuff come from for you?
I don't know. I've always had an interest in spirituality. And I didn't get it from my mom or anybody. I mean, my mom was a typical, she Catholic. I was a Catholic. I was born a Catholic and christened and went through confirmation and first communion and all these things. I did those things. I went through those rituals, but it didn't really have a spiritual connection to me. I always wanted something else. And I'll share another example with you. Sometime in the 70s, they started publishing the Star, which was like the gossip paper, the Star and the Inquirer.
Yeah.
But he started publishing them in the 70s. So my mom used to read them. I love to read. I started reading when I was probably about, I don't know, before I was 4 years old, I was reading, right? So anyway, I used to look through the Star, and they would have these little ads about, do you ever wonder why you were born? Why you're here? This, that, the other. And those were questions that I had at a very early age, preteen, right? And I was like, yeah, I did. And there was an address there to write to. It was the Rosicrucians, the Order of the Rose and Cross, right? I didn't know what the Rosicrucians was at that time. I'm a kid.
Right.
I wrote them, right? And you know how long ago that was? We had airmail envelopes back then with the red, white, and blue. That's how long ago it was, right? They wrote me back, Matt. They wrote me back. They knew I was a kid and told me to come back when I grow up. They said, but later on, much later in life, I learned who and what the Rosicrucians was. And I was like, wow, I wrote these guys, you know what I mean? But I was a kid. I didn't know better. But anyway, I say all of that to say there's always been something in me looking for deeper meaning and purpose in life. Yeah. And I think at this point, I've kind of like gotten to where I'm on that path. I do. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's not the Rosicrucians, by the way. Yeah, man.
So for you, because it's like, yeah, you are on the right path. And I think most people attain to kind of be whatever their path is, their journey is. And I think these kind of conversations are important because people can take some of these things and they're not going to be you, they're not going to be me, but they can apply certain things to their life. But for you, because I know I'm a bit like this, it's like when something's good, you just move on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. But I know you have kids. I know, from what I've heard, your kids have had a bit of success. And what is your, like, and I know this is like the huge, like, what's your legacy? But when you think about your kids, your grandkids, your great grandkids, when you think about the things that you're going to be able to impart into them, most people think finances, but it's way bigger than that. Like, because some people are like, hey, my son or my daughter is going to come take over my business. Others are like, no, they're paving their own kind of trail, or it's your grandson that comes and takes over Scoon TV, 20 years from now. I mean, when you think about those things, have you had dreams, visions? When you think about the future like that, as far as your family and your generational blessings go, have you thought much about that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Unfortunately, being wrongfully accused made me think a lot about how I'd like to be remembered, because that was not how I wanted to be known. I didn't want when people think about me, that's what they thought about. And it also put me on a path to drown all that negative press with positive work. I think more than anything, I just want my legacy to be that I was a righteous man at the end of the day, and hopefully that would inspire others to be righteous as well. Business wise, I give I have a son and a daughter. I give them both a lot of insight and advice, personal and business, I think they're going to be all right. I don't I don't have to leave them anything and they're going to be good. You know what I mean? Like this I believe that. But I want to give them a standard to work towards. I want to live my life a certain way to set an example. You know, you lead by example, man, by the things that you do. And the way some people celebrate their personal accomplishments, they talk about all the material things they have, how many cars, the zeros in their bank account, all this stuff, right? Those things are okay. But rather than talk about how many millions I have, I'd like to talk about how many millionaires I've created, that
Yeah.
I've helped. That you understand what I'm saying? Like, I don't the cars, the trips. I'm in Cancun, I'm in St. Bart's, Curacao. That means nothing to me. I want to impact people's lives and not make them materialistic, but show them that they can become successful doing the right things. Because we know you can become financially rewarded, which is different than being successful in my book, doing the wrong things. You
Yeah.
can get financial rewards. I don't equate that as success. Success to me is having your needs provided for by your own work and efforts, and that you don't compromise who you are to get it. If you say this is what you stand for, that you never have to change and become somebody you're not or somebody you despise. You know, and and we need to really teach the young proper values, back to traditional values. See, I don't deal too much with the specific spiritual aspect because even though I'm a spiritual person, I try not to dictate too much to anybody.
Right.
I think really if they see what I'm doing, they would take an interest in how I did it, and they may seek to emulate it. You know, yeah. But I take ownership and responsibility that some of the things I believe may be wrong. So I'm not really too eager to put those beliefs on other people. You understand what I'm saying? Like, yeah, look, I'll just tell people what I did. This worked for me. Like, for instance, I have a relative who was considering going in the military. Right? In my mind, knowing how that relative had been living, I think the military would have been the best thing for him. But I've never been in the military though. So I have to be honest about that as well. My advice to him was if I was in your shoes, I would go to the military. But that's a decision you have to make because anything can happen when you go over there. And I don't want that burden on me. That's a choice you have to make, and I would support you in it. You know, and I'm very careful about giving advice to people for that reason. I absolutely am, man. You know, because I'm responsible for me, and that's a lot of responsibility already. Not
Right.
not that not that I don't, you know, I'm ducking responsibility, but I would just hate to think I pointed somebody in a direction and it didn't work out. Because the way that I am, I would take ownership of that and feel some kind of way until I corrected it. You know, that's just who I am as a person. So I'm very careful about what I commit to, who I commit to, and how I commit to them.
Yeah. So we've talked about, like, I call it the inner guidance system, the intuition,
Mhm.
because that was kind of a big thing I was curious about with you, with faith, and just kind of, and you've described a lot of that. Talk a bit about the STEM program. Obviously, there's some straightforward things about, getting, boys into these kind of programs, because
Mm.
my wife's an engineer. I know there's plenty of doors open for my daughter, my son, but especially for girls. So talk a bit about why you're passionate about that. I think that's really important because there's the spiritual side that people need, but there's also the other side too.
Okay. Now, for me, I wanted to try to empower young Black kids in a way that they could become economically independent, right? And it was my way of countering all of this activism that's being promoted as the only thing for us to do. Protest, 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 but we don't build anything. You cannot make demands without leverage. And I'm sorry. I don't feel comfortable with that. I don't want to see these kids waste away, waste their youth and their opportunity, not doing something meaningful with their life. Uh, Everyone, they want to be in the entertainment business. They want to be models. They want to be photographers. They want all these trust fund baby careers that people who have money, they can embark on these things because they don't need it to pay their bills. Their bills are already taken care of. But when you're not really aware of the world and how it works, you see these people and you think that everything they got it from what they're doing in entertainment. And that's
Right.
usually not the case. A lot of them they're in a good space. Yes, some people make a lot of money in entertainment, but that's like some people make a lot of money doing a lot of things. Will you be that person? So I really wanted to offer alternatives because I think I think society as a whole is under some sort of social engineering. But I think that the Black community in particular are like the canary in the coal mine because we're the most vulnerable. So you get to see a lot of what's coming for everybody else by what's taking hold of us. If anybody else want to know what's coming their way, just watch what's happening to the Black community
Right.
because we're easy pickings. We're so economically compromised that our pastors are going along with everything. You know, our parents are going along with everything because they don't like Donald Trump. It's like it's so one. It's a singular issue kind of way of thinking. I'm not saying Trump's a great guy or a bad guy, but you cannot go along with your own destruction because you don't like Donald Trump. Okay, you don't like Donald Trump, but you shouldn't like this over here either. You know what I mean? Like it's not one or the other. And I think for us, as a Black man who has a certain level of understanding and intuition, as you will, I think my duty is to try to wake these people up because if they wake up, it will stem the tide. The infection will not go into the community at large, the nation at large. It's only after they've successfully co-opted the Black community can they then start focusing on everyone else. If we're like the Marines, if we resist, it'll never get to anybody else. You know what I mean? So our success is very important. And also, I think that charity begins at home. You know, I think by helping the Black community, I am helping America at large. I'm helping America. A lot of people, if you pay attention, Blacks are being used politically in so many ways by the Democratic Party. Our current president, Joe Biden, has said that George Floyd's death had a greater impact than Martin Luther King's assassination. You know, there are people who would listen to that rubbish and really believe it. You know, and that's the kind of indoctrination my community is subjected to from the highest places constantly from the commercials, from the TV shows, to Cardi B interviewing Joe Biden. These are the signals that are being sent are not really good.
Right.
Our children who are in broken homes, unsupervised, when they're seeing these type of things, they aspire to follow in this footstep. I just think that what's being done to us is so nefarious. It's just it's terrible. And after us, then they're coming for everyone else because then they're going to turn these people, our youth, into their foot soldiers. And you see a lot of it with all the yelling and the signs, and they're out here and this. And I'm right here on the front line, man, and I'm trying to wake up people who want to be awake.
Yeah.
The ones who want to stay sleeping, there's really nothing I can do for them.
And I think there's like an intellectual and spiritual awakening that needs to happen.
Absolutely.
Because it's like, why do all these white liberals, and even many of them are Christian white liberals, and they're giving to BLM? It's like, well, why don't they give to a STEM program that's actually going to change people's lives and empower them, or a school? Or I just don't understand the mentality other than it's like some kind of spiritual sleep is on them where they just can't break free of their own like propaganda that they're living under.
I think about it. You said something about a spell earlier. I've thought about that. I'm thinking from a secular perspective, if they're really just trying to destroy the Black community in totality, or they could just be really dumb and think they're helping and doing something wrong. I don't think that's it, though. I do think from a historical standpoint, when the 4 million slaves were freed in 1865, there was a problem because no one knew what to do with them.
Right.
Originally, there was a plan to give the slaves 40 acres and a mule. And the elite, they didn't have a problem with that. But it was the average whites who had a problem with that because not all of them had 40 acres and a mule.
Right.
And they didn't like the idea that perhaps overnight these slaves would have more than I have. So there was pushback on that. Humanity is a fascinating thing, right? What we're dealing with is classism masquerading as racism.
Right.
There's a lot of classism going on, and the few control the many by keeping us at each other's throat. But we have to be wise with that. So anyway, I think for Black people, there's been a segment of the population of the government that didn't know what to do with us, and they have been planning on ways to reduce our numbers, contain our numbers, and what have you. And I don't think that has ever stopped. I can't tell you what branch of the government, but Margaret Sanger, she was big on pushing family planning, as they call it, abortion.
Yeah.
To the Black community for a reason. There are elements within the U.S. government that see a need to contain the Black population or reduce it. And some would argue eradicate it. I don't know. I'm not going to go that far. But too much effort has been put into misdirecting us through the Black elite who have been like, have you seen the movie Braveheart?
Yeah.
Remember how the Scottish nobles had their lands and titles?
Yeah.
That's exactly how the Black elite work and how the elite of all people work
Yeah.
who are subjugated. You take the 10% or the top 5% or whatever, and they deceive the remainder of the population for their lands and titles. They sit on boards all over the place. They wear nice suits. They're always at the White House, and And what they did was they betrayed their own community.
Yeah.
So a lot of that has been happening.
One, I've heard you talk about the boule, and I know there's a lot of these societies out there that people join and people think, oh, this is just an innocent thing. But you notice they always stay on message. And I imagine you know this, but they go through rituals. They go through spiritual things that are very dark to become, and they get put into compromising positions so that they can then they're part of this thing that's really, really sinister. How much I've heard you talk a bit about this stuff, but I actually, like, there was a person that I was associated with whose father was high up in one of these organizations and was very, very successful, met, who's who of people that are very famous. And there was a lot of spiritual nonsense associated with this, where there was a lot of dark practices that were done. It's kind of like BLM. I don't know if the two founders are practicing basically like witchcraft, and it's called spiritism, and it's where they channel demons. And I travel a bit around the world and do healing and deliverance. And so I've been in Africa, and I put my hands on someone and I'm going to pray for, and the person is demonized, and they take a swing at you. You better know how to cast a demon out of them. And so you're like, stuff you learned growing up, but then it's like full-blown demonization of people. And it goes like, because the CIA and things like that I know you're aware of, the Hollywood programming. And I think people are starting to become awake, and people are hearing these things, but it always gets to the point where they go, oh, you're talking about demons. Oh, that's too far for me. You're talking about the CIA program. But this is all factual stuff. Like, people, this is out there now. It's not hidden. We've known the CIA has trained, guerrilla warfare in other countries to take over dictators. It's all out there. It's not like this stuff is hidden. It's power, control. But anyway, I've said a lot, but let's go back to boule and the LeBron, and people say Jay-Z is a part of this. But how much do you think there's truth in it versus people actually just want to attack a successful person?
Well, I wrote an article in my town hall. Did you read it? Because I addressed the boule and LeBron and all of that, right?
What's the article?
It's called "Are You Not Entertained?"
Okay.
The rise of celebrity in Black leadership. I will tag you on it when we finish this interview. You'll find it interesting. So anyway, the boule was the lower house of the Greek Senate in ancient Greece. Their job were advisors to the king, right? Now the Black boule was modeled after Skull and Bones in Yale. It was formed by Dr. Henry Minton in Philadelphia and about 5 or 6 other Black professional men in 1904. See, we had Black doctors, lawyers, all of that way back then. They were the Black elite. And they had money and everything. There's this perception of that. Black people are always poor because that's the image that works to promote the narrative that's being promoted. But there has always been successful Black people. Some people don't even know that there were Black slave owners in America. Not a lot, but there was a few, so anyway, the boule, their job, I believe, is to misdirect the Black community. They are what W.E.B. Du Bois referred to as the talented 10th, right? He had this theory about the talented 10th, which, by the way, I don't think is exclusive to the Black community. I think that's everybody. In every community, there's a talented 10th.
Yeah.
And the talented 10th of the talented 10th are the 1% that you hear about all the time. You know, they're like on another level. But anyway, the Boule were our black professionals, our lawyers, our judges, our entrepreneurs, all the really successful people of the early 20th century. I believe what their job was to contain the black community and misdirect them. And in exchange, they received access and rewards and what have you. And it goes on to this day. However, a big part of the Boule system, recruiting system, was the HBCU system, historically black colleges and universities, which is why they advocate for them, even though they've outlived their purpose. There's no need for historically black college and university anymore because one, they rely so much on non-black students to get federal funding that they've become pretty much like regular universities, which I think is a good thing. You know what I mean? But the reason why they're key to the Boule is because of the Greek fraternity and sorority system. See, they're named after the lower house of the ancient Greek Senate, and that's why black fraternities have Greek letters.
Ah.
Why, you see, yeah, that's why they have Greek letters. It's not by coincidence, you know. Look, it's because of the system that they're in. Now, most members of these black fraternities and sororities, they're not even aware of what they're involved in.
Right.
They're like a kid who wrote to the Rosicrucians at 9 or 10 years old, not knowing who he was writing. You understand what I'm saying? But part of joining a fraternity or sorority is a humiliation ritual.
Yep.
And I believe the higher up you rank, you rise, the more intense that humiliation becomes. You see, and those are the secrets that they keep on you to control you. Whether I've heard all kinds of talk, but I don't know anyone who's been through it who've confided in me what they had to do. But I've heard talk of homosexuality, bestiality, pedophilia, all of these different things. And sometimes it's recorded, or all the time, I don't know, a whole lot of different things that go on. And I believe on the collegiate level, the undergrad level, the little things about getting spanked with the paddles and having to do stupid things, run outside naked and all that, that's a mild version of what's to come.
Right.
So yeah, that's how they're controlled, through the humiliation and what have you. And you have to ask yourself, why does it mean that much to people to even join these things? And by the way, most people in fraternities and sororities, black fraternities and sororities, they never get to learn about what's really going on. And last but not least, there's a very famous picture of the Lorraine Motel when Dr. King was assassinated. Every black man in that picture was Boule, including the man on the ground with a bullet in his neck. They were all Boule.
Yep.
You know, yeah. So when sometimes, you know, the reason why I speak on these things is because I think a lot of white people, they don't really know much about black people because they don't interact with us on a day-to-day regular basis, right? And even when they do, the ones they interact with may not even be aware of these things. So they're not going to get this information from them. But when you see the black community in step on issues, it's because of people like the Boule who are taking instructions from white people. These are organic black reactions to America. When you see anti-patriotic rhetoric coming from black people on a collective effort, it has origins elsewhere. And I don't know if black people are being set up to be sacrificed as non-contributive, non-patriotic, just a burden, a liability, complainers. This is the narrative that's being framed of us that a lot of people are really buying into without understanding how it got to be like that. And we all, on all sides, have to be mindful not to get played like suckers.
Yep.
You know, and understand who the real villain is, who the real enemy is. You know what I mean? And not the stooge that they send out there with a microphone. Now, I hear people talk about Al Sharpton that with so much vitriol, man, they hate Al Sharpton. But he's a peon, man. He's a pawn. We got to figure out who's pulling his strings so we could cut those strings.
Yep.
He's nobody. There's a million more lined up just to be like him. Yep. They want those butter biscuits, man. You know, look, for real.
Yeah. When it's all races, nationalities, they're all, there's people lined up to promote the message as long as they got some money in their pockets or even just some fame. That's, Al Sharpton is, he's kind of past his time in a sense where it's like, you gotta be a part of the next thing to keep his name, and that's what people try to do to have celebrity, because then people will go, oh yeah, he's a reverend.
You know what's amazing about the Boule is that Dr. Henry Minton and the other men who started it, they were highly intelligent men, professional men. They could stand on equal footing with anybody as far as intellect and capabilities. But what has happened in the 100 years plus since then is that the black elite, their influence over the black community has been usurped by black celebrities. Look, so now you have someone like LeBron James or Dwayne Wade who didn't go to college. They don't even have the same intellectual capacity for right or wrong that their predecessors had. And there's an interesting photo of LeBron where he has the tattoo of the Boule lion on his chest. And he does a lot of hand signals and stuff before games and everything. He might not even really know what he's doing, man. He just knows that this is what he's doing and he's going to get paid. He's going to get a big contract with Nike and so on and so forth. Or he may know. I don't know. But it's not right whether he knows or he doesn't. It's not right. How much money do you need, LeBron? All of these people, it makes me wonder if they have a choice in the matter or is there something hanging over their head? Because they have more money than they can spend. They don't need any more money, man.
Right.
They don't.
One, I think what happens a lot of times, it goes back to my football days when you're like in 6th or 7th grade and they see, oh, that kid, he's going to be a superstar. And I watched, in the 6th and 7th grade when all these coaches from high school are like, hey, come to our private school. We'll pay your way. We'll move your mom into town. And all that stuff starts. I think there's a spiritual side to this too, where they're like, oh, we can help this person, but they're also going to indoctrinate them into their thing. And this is true in religion because I see it, whether it's conservative or whether it's a liberal church or somewhere in between. It's like many times it's the same propaganda that gets put out where it's wrapped up or masqueraded as this is the Bible, but it's this interpretation that almost puts people under a spell to where the Bible, talks about drinking milk, eating meat, or having mystery. And most of Christian churches are just teaching the milk. And it keeps people in this infantile state where they're not able to think for themselves. They go to the pastor for counseling, for everything. And they don't grow up in the sense of becoming fully manifested sons or daughters of God. But it's the same thing in science, politics. Like it just, it's like all of these places have been infiltrated to where, my kind of thing is like, when it comes to spirituality and religion, there's so much nonsense that people now just say it and they'll be like, oh, that's in the Bible. And it's not, it's a nice thing. It sounds good. Or their belief about God has nothing to do with God. It has to do with, something that it's like programming, and I've noticed, I've heard you talk about Palestine and some of these things where some of my liberal friends, the two main factors of where you'll see where churches or denominations actually start to dip in their numbers and then close down. Because during COVID, I think it was 1 out of 5 churches actually shut down.
Wow.
Well, it's the churches that are promoting Palestine and any kind of perversion that have actually lost the most money and the most numbers. And it's just fascinating. But like, these issues are, they're in every sector of society, where it is, when you talk about certain demographics being targeted, like, to me, it seems pretty straightforward that that's true. It's not just the man and the nuclear family, but it seems like the black man is the one that people go after, where it's like, the woman's going to be in charge, wearing a dress or wearing a suit, whatever lifestyle they want to live. And the thing is, I have friends that live alternate lifestyles. I have no judgment towards them whatsoever. Like, people can, it's like you said in the beginning, people can do whatever they want to do. I don't have a problem with that. That's their deal. But it comes back to that identity issue, is people want to put their identity into something that has nothing to do. It's like, oh, I'm this sex or I'm that sex. I mean, I'm watching this with my kids, where it's like they go through the LGBTQ ABCDEFG stuff, and it's the propaganda in the public schools to where, my kids report back to me that, like, there's one gay kid at school, one boy who's gay, but there's all these girls now that say they're bisexual. And it's after they've gone through the training of basically anything goes. You can label yourself whatever you want. And these are, 10 to 13-year-olds that have no making any decision about their future. So I know I've just said a lot, but it's like, to me, I guess I just want to say to you is, these issues, as you've hit the politics, you've produced, you've done these different things, but this is no different in the church, where I think pastors are afraid now to stand up and speak the truth. There are still a few of them that will speak the truth, but I love, what is your tagline of the truth is, you may be offended by the truth, but it's never sin, or something like that?
Yeah, the truth may be an offense, but it is never a sin. Yes. Yeah.
And there's been a propaganda even in conservative Christianity, where it's like, oh, you can't say that. You might offend somebody, but offense is always a choice. You don't have to ever be offended with anything.
Correct.
So why don't we wrap up with this? So going back to, you talked about Dr. Martin Luther King, the Boule, and I've heard you say, and I can't remember how you said it, but I've heard you say that Dr. King said something about, did he leave people in a burning house?
Yeah, there's a well-known quote from him that he made not long before his death, his assassination, that he feared that he integrated his people into a burning house. And his fears were warranted, because I think when he got killed, it was a signal to the other people who were there not to get any bright ideas. And we know that Jesse's been on code ever since, Jesse Jackson, because he was there. He's been on code ever since. So, I mean, there's a lot going on. I try not to judge these people. I think they were wrong, but I don't know what they had to deal with. I can't imagine what it was like to be a black man under Jim Crow, to feel so powerless and emasculated. I think there's a lot of things that we take for granted in 2021. I will say that at the end of the day, they get a lot of credit for things that they didn't do, and they don't get enough credit for the things that they did, which aren't so great and rosy. You know
Right.
why they did it, or I don't know, but we have to be honest about history, about everything, not to disparage people, not to tear down idols or anything like that. But when you use your GPS, you have to be honest about your location in order to find your way to your destination. If we want to be dishonest about where we are, how can we ever get to where we're trying to go?
Right.
Well, where do you start? You're not even being honest about your location. So yes, for me, it's not about tearing down icons or anything. Much like the work that I've done that I don't pay much attention to. If I don't pay attention to my work, why am I going to pay attention to their work? We got so much work to do at hand. I think we need to pay attention to that.
Right. But there are a few of those guys out there, like I've heard you mention Mark Lamont. You know, there's people like that somebody has to actually speak against, and the whole men can get pregnant and all this.
Yeah, I do it all the time. I speak against them all the time. I make no friends doing it either.
Right, but it's like somebody has to be a voice against these people of equal power, because other people just go, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. But it's like there are the things of like, yeah, we don't want to tear down icons, but at the same time, it's like, how far is this guy going to go? And he's just like a Reverend Sharpton. It's like he's out there, somebody's pulling the strings, because people want to talk about Bill Gates or different people like that. But it's like, who is really the ones pulling the strings? Those are the ones that, I don't want to use too harsh of language, but those are the ones that need to be stopped spiritually, emotionally, financially, who are trying to turn the world upside down for their strange, I don't know, I can't pretend to know why they want to do the things they do, but yeah, it's just.
Matt, let me ask you something, right? You're a pastor. Did it ever cross your mind that Satan is the god of this world? And you're saying who's pulling the strings? Maybe the higher up you go, the more evident it becomes that it's not man in control of what's going on in this world after all.
Right.
And maybe this world is just a test, right? And we have to know the truth in order to make proper decisions. But free will is the power we have not to succumb to the temptation that's all around us. When I think about what's going on in the world, forget race and ethnicity or even religion, it just really seems like there's an evil force behind much of what we see in the world. And that the people that we see, they're just two-bit players and actors.
Right.
And I don't think that there's a man behind the curtain. There might be something else behind the curtain that you don't want to look at. So through the grace, those of us will experience some protections just by our actions, by our faith and what have you. Still some people that maybe can't be touched because of that. But the more we indulge in wickedness, the more we become susceptible to wickedness. It's not that God abandons us, but through our wickedness, we abandon God. And as a result, we become fair game. These are things that I play with in my head. I have no scriptural basis for any of that. But I definitely believe that when you do wrong things, you open yourself up to having wrong happen to you. Um, a lot of people, man, they might not understand that good does not have to destroy evil. Evil, by its very nature, is self-destructive.
Yep.
Evil people will eliminate other evil people.
Yep.
Good people don't have to lift a finger. You understand what I'm saying? By its very nature, evil is self-destructive. So, I mean, we have choices. Do you want to be good or do you want to be evil? If you want to be evil, you're on your own. You got to deal with the other evil people, and they may be a little bit more evil than you. You know what I mean? Like, there's levels to that. And if you're good, you just enjoy your protection and keep your distance, and that's it. Man. And stay good and stay protected. At least that's my thought. It may sound a little, a little green or naive, but
No,
there's something going on.
it's spot on. It's like being the king of your neighborhood. You're pretty powerful until you realize, oh, the guy in the two blocks down is just as powerful, or maybe he's got, more than I do. There's, they'll just take themselves out if you just back up and let them do their thing.
Let them deal with each other. Correct, and they will.
And I think it goes back to what you said. It's like identity, and then it's that fire. It's that refining fire that you talked about, and the process that you've gone through of like sometimes we have to be the ones to pull other people out of the fire, but sometimes we have to just go, you know what? They've got to go through their thing, and we might just be there on the outside seeing it, supporting them, maybe praying for them, but sometimes people just have to go through that themselves, and they have to do it just them and God. And that's that process. But it's like, yeah, to me, I kind of minimized it in this conversation because I didn't want to go into crazy town because,
I know.
But there definitely is a spiritual force behind a lot of these things where people just, the brain mind control, put under a spell, and it's like they're zombies. You see some of these zombie shows. It's like, yeah, that's America. That's a lot of different countries where it's like the same programming is put out. As I've gone to different places around the world, the programming is a little different, but it's still money, power. People are doing different things to get it. But at the end of the day, like when I go, when I travel to other countries, especially like different countries in Africa, they're like, oh, we have a corrupt government. I'm like, they think the USA isn't corrupt. And I'm like, oh, ours is corrupt too. It's no different. It's, there's a bit of corruption everywhere. And I like what you said, let them take each other out.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there's got to be people like you who pave the way for others to not have to go through what you've gone through, so that they can be thankful, for, what God's done in their life, and they don't have to, survive such fiery tests like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the Bible, in the fiery furnace. It's not for everybody. Not everybody's going to make it out of those things,
No, they're not.
So, man, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. I really wanted to know like some of the things that you've talked about, like the intuition, what guides you, those kind of things, because I think there are a bunch of pieces from this conversation that people can actually take out and be who they're created to be, not you, not me, and be inspired. I mean, and I think that's the thing where I think you're going to see yourself in situations where, yeah, you may not get on Fox News or CNN. Yeah, I don't know, right? Because you're not exactly, you don't play the politics game.
Nah.
But I do see you being invited to churches to speak. I do see you like doing no, you're not going to do a 25 steps to being a successful entrepreneur, those kind of things. Although you'd probably have a packed house, but I just really think that the spiritual sense of you, I don't think gets highlighted enough. I've heard you talk bits and pieces about it, but that's what I was really curious. So thank you so much for sharing your heart. I would love to talk to you again, because there's so many things that we didn't get into that especially my audience would definitely benefit from hearing your experiences. Because I hate to, I hear people say this to you a lot. Oh, you're a really intelligent guy, which doesn't cut it, because you have wisdom, and there's a spiritual wisdom that it can't be something that you learn from reading a book, even though you have all that stuff. And I just watch you, you're like 1940, this happened. Like, your stuff. And so anyway, I'm going to stop rambling on. I just want to say it's an honor to have you on. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time out to do this. And just as we close this up, would you remind people, where can they find you? Talk a bit about the things that you're doing right now.
I think you can go to ScoonTV.com and you'll see my writings in the town hall. There's the promotion for my film, Black, White, and Blue, at the bottom of the site on the homepage. There's the website for the STEM program that I discussed earlier with the Coleman Alexander Young II Foundation, CAY2foundation.org. And there's also the business consulting company that Coleman has, that I helped him set up on the site. Everything that I do is on that website. And if you want to support, you can have a free membership and get the newsletter, or you can have the primary pass and the presidential pass. And those are different levels of access for video content, visual content. There's a lot of interesting things I do. Over the weekend, I was downtown, and we did some interviews outside the White House and outside the African American Museum, where we discussed the Boule and so on and so forth, and by the Washington Monument. So I'm giving viewers a lot of different views and takes. I'm going to do man on the street interviews and all that. But the bottom line is, my underlying mission is to spread truth and get an alternative view other than the propaganda that we have in our mainstream media. Only 5 companies own exactly all of media in the United States, but not Scoon TV.
Amen.
All right. Thank you.
And so your subscription-based services, it's similar to, like, if somebody wants to read the New York Times, and I hope nobody reads the New York Times, but eventually,
No, I only visual content for pay, but you can read all my articles in their entirety for free on the site. I just got to generate money some kind of way to keep that going. I would like to have more articles all the time. Currently, we release maybe 1 or 2 articles a day tops, but I would like to release about 3 or 4 articles a day. But I would need more writers, and I have to pay those people. So I have to generate money. So rather than have a Patreon or what's the other thing, when GoFundMe and all that to raise money, I prefer to always give somebody something for the money that they give me. Passing a hat is not really my thing, Right. So if you give me some money, I'm going to give you some service, but I'm already giving you a lot of free stuff anyway. So I think it'll be well worth the money for anyone interested.
Absolutely. And like I said, you're the best Twitter follow out there, and your movie, absolutely fantastic. And you need to do more movies. So
Thank you.
I hope you guys do, because it was fantastic. So
thank you, Matt.
So ScoonTV.com, it's got everything you need, and the interviews with you are off the charts. Some of them are free on YouTube, but I imagine there's some good paid content in there as well.
Absolutely.
So thank you again for coming on the show, and we will hopefully talk again soon. So thank you.
let's do this again in about another 4 months.
Absolutely.
All right? Okay.
Yep. Thanks,
Have
man.
a good one. Thank you.
That does it for this episode of Everyday Supernatural. Thanks for tuning in. To hear more episodes of Everyday Supernatural, head over to everydaysupernatural.org.